King Alaric had resigned himself to a loveless political marriage with the allegedly plain Lady Cordelia. But when his mysterious bride finally lifted her wedding veil, the entire royal court gasped at the breathtaking beauty hidden beneath a woman whose emerald eyes blazed with secrets that could either unite or destroy his kingdom. But if she wasn't the noble daughter he'd been promised to marry, then who was this enchanting stranger who had just become his queen? Thunder crashed overhead as King Alaric paced the cold stone floor of his castle tower. Rain pounded against the tall windows like angry fists, and lightning lit up his worried face. He stopped walking and stared at the letter in his hands, the same letter he had read 100 times that week. The paper felt rough under his fingers as he read the words again. Lady Cordelia Ravencrest would arrive tomorrow to become his wife. Their marriage would join two powerful wolf kingdoms together, stopping a war that could kill thousands of his people. But the letter said nothing good about what she looked like. Plain as morning porridge, his advisor had whispered. Face like a wet horse, another had joked. The small painting that came with the letter showed only shadows and a bent head covered by dark hair. Alaric couldn't even see her eyes. He walked to the window and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Outside, his wolf guards patrolled the castle walls. Their sharp noses could smell danger from miles away, but they couldn't smell his fear. At 30 years old, Alaric had fought in many battles. He had killed enemy wolves with his bare hands. He could shift into a massive black wolf that made grown men shake with terror. But the thought of marrying a stranger made his stomach twist into knots. His wolf stirred inside his chest, restless and angry. The beast wanted to run free in the forest, to hunt and howl at the moon. Instead, Alaric was trapped in a castle, about to marry a woman he had never met for reasons that had nothing to do with love. The door creaked open behind him. Marcus, his best friend and second in command, stepped inside. Water dripped from his dark hair, and his boots left muddy prints on the floor. "The roads are getting worse," Marcus said, shaking rain from his coat. "Lady Cordelia's carriage might not make it through the storm." Alaric felt a small spark of hope. Maybe the storm would delay the wedding. Maybe something would happen to stop this whole mess. But then he remembered the thousands of people counting on this marriage to keep them safe. "She'll come," Alaric said, his voice flat. "She has to." Marcus walked over to stand beside him at the window. "You know, ugly women can make good wives. They're grateful for attention. They work harder to please their husbands." Alaric's hands curled into fists. "I don't want a grateful wife. I want—" He stopped talking. What did he want? Love seemed like a silly dream for a king. His parents had married for love, and they had been happy until the day they died. But that was different. That was before the wars started. "You want what every man wants," Marcus finished. "A woman who makes your heart race when she walks into a room." Through the window, Alaric could see the main road winding up to his castle. Tomorrow, a carriage would travel that road, carrying his future wife, a woman who would share his bed, bear his children, and stand beside him as queen. A woman whose face might make him cringe every time he looked at her. His wolf paced inside him, sensing his unhappiness. The beast didn't care about politics or alliances. It only cared about finding its mate, the one person in the world who would complete them both. But wolves didn't always get to choose their mates. Sometimes duty came first. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. In the brief moment of brightness, Alaric thought he saw something moving on the road below. But when he looked closer, there was nothing but rain and darkness. "Get some sleep," Marcus said, heading for the door. "Tomorrow will be a long day." After his friend left, Alaric stayed by the window for hours. He watched the storm rage outside and tried to imagine what his life would be like after tomorrow. Would he and his new wife eat dinner in silence? Would they have nothing to talk about except the weather and castle business? Would he spend the rest of his life pretending to be happy? The rain finally stopped just before dawn, but dark clouds still covered the sky. Alaric had not slept at all. His eyes burned with tiredness, but his mind was too busy to rest. Today, he would meet the woman who would change his life forever. He dressed in his finest clothes, a black shirt that matched his hair, and dark pants that showed off his tall, strong body. In the mirror, he looked like a king, but inside, he felt like a scared boy about to face his worst nightmare. The sound of horse hooves on wet stones echoed through the castle courtyard like drum beats announcing doom. Alaric stood at the top of the great stairs, watching as a plain wooden carriage rolled through his gates. His heart hammered against his ribs so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The carriage looked ordinary, nothing fancy or decorated like he had expected. Mud covered the wheels, and the horses looked tired from their long journey. Maybe the Ravencrest family wasn't as wealthy as people said. Maybe this whole marriage was a mistake. Marcus appeared at his side, along with 20 of their best wolf warriors. They formed 2 lines on either side of the stairs, creating a path of honor for the arriving bride. But Alaric felt more like they were his guards at an execution. The carriage door opened with a soft creak. A small, gloved hand appeared first, followed by a figure completely covered in a dark blue cloak. The hood was pulled up, hiding her face in deep shadows. Alaric squinted, trying to see something, anything, that might tell him what she looked like. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone who was afraid or trying not to trip. Her head stayed down as she walked toward the stairs. The only thing Alaric could see was the tip of her nose and her lips, which looked soft and pink. At least her mouth wasn't terrible. "Your Majesty," she said when she reached the bottom of the stairs. Her voice was quiet but clear, like water running over smooth stones. "I am honored to be here." She started to bow, but Alaric quickly walked down to meet her. Kings didn't let their brides bow to them in public. It looked bad. As he got closer, he caught a smell that made his wolf sit up and pay attention. She smelled like wild flowers and moonlight, fresh and clean and somehow familiar. "The honor is mine, Lady Cordelia," he said, offering her his arm. "Welcome to your new home." When her fingers touched his arm, even through her gloves and his sleeve, something electric shot through his body. His wolf stirred, interested for the first time in days. What was that about? They walked up the stairs together while the crowd watched in silence. Alaric could feel everyone trying to get a look at his bride, but her hood hid everything important. All they could see was that she was small and moved with grace, like a dancer or someone trained to fight. Inside the great hall, servants had prepared a welcome feast. Long tables were loaded with roasted meat, fresh bread, and the finest wine from the castle's stores. Hundreds of candles lit the room with warm, golden light. Everything looked perfect and romantic, but Alaric felt like he was at his own funeral. He led Lady Cordelia to the high table where they would sit together. She kept her head down and her hands folded, the perfect picture of a shy, obedient bride. But something about the way she moved suggested she wasn't as meek as she appeared. "You must be tired from your journey," Alaric said as they sat down. "The roads have been difficult with all this rain." "Yes, Your Majesty, but we managed." She reached for her cup with steady hands that didn't shake at all. Most people were nervous around him, especially women. His size and reputation scared them, but this woman seemed calm, almost too calm. Throughout dinner, Lady Cordelia spoke only when spoken to. She gave short, polite answers that revealed nothing about her thoughts or feelings. She ate small bites and kept her face turned away from the light. It was like having dinner with a ghost. But Alaric noticed other things. The way she held her fork suggested good manners and expensive training. When someone dropped a plate in the kitchen, her head snapped toward the sound like a warrior checking for danger. And once, when she laughed softly at something Marcus said, the sound was so pretty it made Alaric's chest tight. The strangest thing was her smell. Every time she moved, that wild flower scent got stronger. His wolf kept pushing forward, wanting to get closer to her. It was confusing and frustrating. How could he be attracted to a woman he couldn't even see? "Tell me about your family," Alaric said, desperate to get her talking. "Your father writes that you enjoy reading." For the first time all evening, she looked directly at him. In the candlelight, he caught a glimpse of purple eyes so bright and beautiful they took his breath away. But she quickly looked down again. "Yes, Your Majesty. Books help pass the time." Her voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. After dinner, the servants cleared the tables and the musicians began to play. Dancing was traditional at welcome feasts, but Lady Cordelia made no move to join the other couples on the floor. She sat perfectly still, watching the celebration like she was studying it instead of enjoying it. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Alaric asked, standing and offering his hand. She hesitated for just a moment, so briefly that anyone else would have missed it. But Alaric caught the slight pause, the quick breath she took before nodding. "Of course, Your Majesty." When she stood and put her hand in his, that electric feeling shot through him again. This time it was stronger, making his wolf pace with excitement. What was happening to him? They moved to the center of the dance floor, and every eye in the room followed them. This would be the first time anyone saw them together as a couple, the first hint of what kind of marriage this would be. The music started slow and formal. Lady Cordelia knew the steps perfectly, moving with a grace that surprised him. She was light on her feet and easy to lead, but there was strength in her small frame. When the dance required him to lift her, she felt solid and real in his arms, not fragile like he had expected. "You dance beautifully," he said softly, so only she could hear. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Still polite, still distant, but her purple eyes flicked up to meet his again, and this time they held a spark of something that might have been curiosity. The song ended too soon. As the music faded, Lady Cordelia stepped back and bowed her head again. The moment of connection was gone, leaving Alaric feeling empty and confused. "I should retire," she said. "Tomorrow will be a busy day." The wedding was tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, this mysterious woman would become his wife and queen. And he still didn't know what she looked like, what she thought about, or why his wolf was going crazy every time she got near. As she walked away, her blue cloak swirling around her feet, Alaric caught one more whiff of that incredible scent. His hands clenched into fists as he fought the urge to follow her, to demand that she remove her hood and show him her face. What was Lady Cordelia Ravencrest hiding? And why did every instinct in his body tell him that tomorrow would change everything? The sacred moonstone began to crack right as the wedding ceremony ended. Nobody saw it happen except Maya, the young servant girl who had been watching from behind the kitchen door. The ancient stone that had blessed royal marriages for 300 years now had a thin line running straight down its middle, glowing with an eerie blue light. King Alaric stood frozen as his new wife removed her heavy silver veil. Where everyone expected to see the plain face described in letters, a stunning woman emerged. Her long black hair caught the torchlight like silk. Green eyes sparkled with intelligence and something else, fear? Her skin was smooth as cream, and her lips curved in a nervous smile that made every man in the great hall forget to breathe. "I am not Lady Cordelia," she announced, her voice clear and strong, despite the trembling in her hands. "My name is Raven Blackwood. I took her place because she is dead." The wedding guests erupted in shocked whispers. Lord Magnus, the king's chief advisor, stepped forward with his face red with anger. "This is impossible. The marriage contract clearly states." "The contract is with House Ravencrest," Alaric interrupted, his golden eyes never leaving Raven's face. His wolf was going crazy inside him, pacing and howling with recognition. She smelled like wild roses and rain, nothing like the letters had described Cordelia. If the true heir is dead, then who has the stronger claim to represent that house? Raven lifted her chin, and for a moment, She looked every inch a queen. I was Cordelia's closest friend. Her dying wish was that I prevent the war between our territories. She knew that, without this marriage, your kingdom and the eastern lands would destroy each other. Old Martha, the head cook, gasped from her hiding spot near the servants' entrance. She had seen Raven arrive 3 days ago, cloaked and mysterious. But Martha had also noticed something else. The way the young woman's eyes had followed King Alaric during the pre-wedding ceremonies. This was not just duty. This was something deeper. "Where is the proof of Lady Cordelia's death?" demanded Lord Magnus, his hand moving to his sword. As the king's oldest friend, he had arranged this marriage to secure the kingdom's future. Now, everything was falling apart. Raven reached into the folds of her wedding dress and pulled out a silver locket. Inside was a miniature painting of a girl who looked nothing like her. Blonde where Raven was dark, blue-eyed where ravens were green, soft where Raven was fierce. This belonged to Cordelia. She gave it to me before she died of fever 2 weeks ago. Her father doesn't even know yet. The king stepped closer, studying the locket. His enhanced wolf senses could detect no lie in Raven's scent, but there was definitely more to her story. "You traveled here alone? Pretended to be a noblewoman? That takes either great courage or great foolishness." "Maybe both," Raven admitted, and despite everything, she almost smiled. "But I've seen what happens when kingdoms fight. I've walked through burned villages and counted orphaned children. If my deception could prevent that." Young Prince Derek, Alaric's teenage brother, watched from the royal table with wide eyes. He had been dreading this wedding, afraid it would change his close relationship with his brother. But now he saw something he'd never seen before. His brother, looking at a woman like she was precious, beyond gold. "Lord Magnus wasn't finished. Even if we believe your story, you have no noble blood, no training in court politics, no dowry. What do you offer our kingdom?" Before Raven could answer, a commotion erupted at the great hall's main entrance. The massive wooden doors burst open, and a travel-stained messenger stumbled in, gasping for breath. "Your Majesty!" the messenger called out, dropping to one knee. "Urgent news from the eastern borders." King Alaric felt his stomach drop. Whatever this news was, it would change everything. "Speak." "The Eastern Army has been mobilizing for 3 days. Lord Ravencrest leads them personally. They march toward our borders with siege weapons and enough supplies for a month-long war." The wedding guests began talking all at once, their voices rising in panic. If Cordelia's father was coming with an army, he either didn't know about his daughter's death or he blamed the Northern Kingdom for it. Raven went pale, her green eyes wide with horror. "No," she whispered. "This wasn't supposed to happen. The marriage was meant to prevent war, not start one." King Alaric made a decision that would haunt him for weeks to come. "Clear the hall, everyone except my family and closest advisors." As people began filing out, he turned to face his new wife, if she really was his wife. "Now, Lady Raven, you're going to tell me the complete truth. Because if Lord Ravencrest is coming for war, I need to know exactly what we're facing." Maya, still hidden behind the kitchen door, saw something that made her heart race. As the king spoke, his shadow on the wall briefly shifted into the shape of a massive wolf. And for just a second, Raven's shadow did the same thing. But her wolf form looked different. Smaller, but somehow more dangerous, with pointed ears and a tail that seemed to move independently. Maya had heard the old stories about bloodlines and magic. She had a terrible feeling that this wedding was just the beginning of something much bigger and much more dangerous than anyone realized. The War Council meeting started before dawn, and Raven wasn't invited. She paced her new chambers like a caged animal, listening to the sound of boots in the hallway and horses being prepared in the courtyard below. Through her window, she could see the Northern Army assembling keys, row after row of warriors in leather armor, their faces grim with the promise of battle. King Alaric had been different since the messenger's news, colder, more distant. When he'd escorted her to these chambers last night, his golden eyes had been full of questions she wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. A soft knock interrupted her worried thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting a servant with breakfast. Instead, Prince Derek entered, carrying a tray of food himself. At 16, he was already tall and strong, but his face still held traces of boyhood. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on her small table. "That's kind of you." Raven studied the young prince, noting how much he resembled his older brother. "But shouldn't you be in the war council?" Derek's expression darkened. "Lord Magnus says I'm too young, but I'm not too young to fight in a war." He moved to the window, staring down at the gathering army. "Is it true? About Lady Cordelia?" Raven joined him at the window. She could trust this boy, she decided. He had his brother's honest eyes. Yes. She caught fever on the road to her wedding. There was nothing anyone could do. "But there's more, isn't there?" Derek's voice was quiet but insistent. "You're not just any friend of hers. You're something special." Before Raven could answer, the chamber door opened again. This time it was King Alaric himself, still wearing his council clothes and looking like he hadn't slept. Behind him walked Lord Magnus and Captain Torres, the leader of the royal guard. "Derek, you shouldn't be here," Alaric said, but his tone was gentle. "Neither should she be locked away like a prisoner," Derek replied, surprising everyone with his boldness. "If she's truly your wife, she should be part of these discussions." Lord Magnus snorted. "The boy has a point, though I disagree with his reasoning. This woman has brought war to our doorstep. She should face questioning." Raven straightened her shoulders, meeting each man's gaze in turn. "I'm ready to answer your questions." Captain Torres, a scarred veteran of many battles, spoke first. "Our scouts report that Lord Ravencrest's army will reach our borders in 2 days. They carry black banners, the sign of a revenge march. What exactly does he think we did to his daughter?" I sent him a letter 3 weeks ago," Raven admitted, her heart sinking. "I told him that Cordelia had arrived safely and the wedding would proceed as planned. I signed her name." King Alaric closed his eyes, and she could see him fighting for control. When he opened them again, his wolf was very close to the surface. "So he thinks his daughter is here, alive, and when he discovers she's not, he'll assume we killed her," Lord Magnus finished grimly. "Or that she died because of our negligence. Either way, he'll want blood." Derek stepped protectively closer to Raven. "There has to be another way. Some way to prove the truth without fighting." Captain Torres shook his grizzled head. "Lord Ravencrest isn't known for listening to explanations. He's a warrior first, a diplomat never. When his scouts see our army, he'll assume we're preparing to attack his lands." "What if I went to him?" Raven suggested desperately. "What if I rode out under a flag of peace and explained everything?" "Absolutely not," Alaric said immediately. His protective instincts were roaring, even though he barely knew this woman. "If he believes we harmed his daughter, seeing you would only enrage him more." A new voice interrupted from the doorway. "Perhaps there's another solution." Everyone turned to see Maya, the young servant, standing nervously in the entrance. She held something wrapped in cloth. "Maya, what are you doing here?" Captain Torres demanded. The girl held out her bundle with shaking hands. "I found this in Lady Raven's travel bag when I was unpacking her things, I thought. I thought it might be important." Raven's face went white as Maya unwrapped a small leather journal. "That's private," she whispered. But Lord Magnus had already taken the journal and was flipping through its pages. His eyebrows rose higher with each page he read. "This is interesting. Very interesting indeed." He looked up at Raven with new respect and suspicion. "You're not just any friend of Lady Cordelia's. According to this journal, you're her half-sister. Same father, different mothers." The room fell silent, except for Derek's sharp intake of breath. King Alaric stared at Raven as if seeing her for the first time. "Is this true?" Raven's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Lord Ravencrest had an affair with my mother when I was very young. She was a healer in his castle. When his wife found out, my mother and I were sent away with enough gold to stay quiet. But that means, Derek started, that means she does have noble blood. Lord Magnus said slowly, illegitimate, but noble nonetheless. And if Lady Cordelia is truly dead, then Raven here might actually be Lord Ravencrest's only living heir. Captain Torres whistled low. This changes things. If Lord Ravencrest acknowledges her as his daughter, he won't, Raven said bitterly. He spent 20 years pretending I don't exist. Why would he change now? King Alaric moved to the window, his mind racing through possibilities. Outside, more soldiers were arriving from the outer territories. Soon he would have an army large enough to match Lord Ravencrest's forces, but the cost in lives would be terrible. There's something else, Maya said quietly. Last night, after everyone went to bed, I saw Lady Raven in the gardens. She was talking to the wolves. Everyone stared at the servant girl, then at Raven, who had gone even paler. What do you mean, talking to them? Alaric asked carefully. Maya swallowed hard. The wild wolves that live in the forest behind the castle, a whole pack of them came right up to her, and she spoke to them like they were old friends. They understood her, Your Majesty. I swear they did. The implications hit everyone at the same time. If Raven could communicate with wild wolves, she wasn't just any shifter. She was something much more rare and much more powerful. Lord Magnus closed the journal with a snap. Well, this certainly complicates our situation. We have 2 days before Lord Ravencrest arrives with his army. 2 days to decide whether this young woman is our salvation or our doom. As if summoned by his words, a horn sounded from the watchtower. 3 long blasts that meant urgent news. Captain Torres ran to the window and cursed under his breath. What is it? Alaric demanded. A second army approaches from the west. Different banners. Torres grabbed his spyglass for a better look. It's Lord Blackwood, Raven's adoptive father. If I'm reading the family crests correctly. Raven sank into a chair, her face in her hands. This is a disaster. I thought I was preventing a war, but I've started 2 of them instead. Prince Derek put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Maybe not. Maybe this is exactly what we needed, a chance to solve everything at once. King Alaric turned from the window, and when he looked at Raven, his expression had changed again. This time, instead of suspicion or anger, she saw determination. 2 armies, 2 fathers, and one very complicated truth, he said. I think it's time we stopped running from this situation and faced it head on. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the castle walls as Maya crept through the servants' corridors, her heart hammering like a drum in her chest. She had fooled everyone for 3 whole days, but now the real test was coming. King Alaric wanted to have breakfast with his new wife, alone, with no servants around to hide behind. Her hands shook as she smoothed down the simple blue dress the real Cordelia would have worn. The heavy crown jewels felt like chains around her neck. Every step toward the royal dining room felt like walking toward her own grave. What would happen when he discovered she was just a poor girl from the village? Would he throw her in the dungeon, send her to the executioner? The massive oak doors loomed before her, like the mouth of a dragon. Maya took a deep breath and pushed them open. Good morning, my queen, Alaric said, standing by a window that overlooked the royal gardens. His voice was softer than she expected, not the harsh command she had heard during the wedding ceremony. Sunlight caught the gold threads in his dark hair, making him look almost human instead of the frightening king she had married. Maya curtsied deeply, keeping her eyes on the floor. Good morning, Your Majesty. Please, sit. He gestured to a chair at the small table. And call me Alaric when we're alone. We are married now, after all. The words sent a chill through her bones. Married. To a king. What had she gotten herself into? As they ate in awkward silence, Maya noticed things about him she hadn't seen during the grand wedding. The way he cut his bread into perfect squares. How he kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. The small scar above his left eyebrow that made him seem less like a statue and more like a real person. "Tell me about your home," Alaric said suddenly, making Maya nearly choke on her eggs. "What was your favorite thing about the Eastern lands?" Panic shot through her like lightning. She had never been to the Eastern lands. Cordelia had told her some stories. But what if she got something wrong? What if he had been there before? The flowers, she stammered, remembering something Cordelia had mentioned. Blue moonflowers that only bloom at night. They smell like vanilla and starlight. Alaric's eyes lit up with interest. "I've heard of those, but never seen them. Perhaps you could show me how to grow them in our gardens?" I would like that very much," Maya replied, her voice barely a whisper. The kindness in his voice made her chest feel tight with guilt. He seemed like a good man, and she was lying to him about everything. "You seem nervous around me," Alaric observed, setting down his cup. "I know this marriage was arranged, but I hope we can at least become friends. I don't want you to fear me." "Fear him?" Maya almost laughed. She didn't fear him anymore. She feared disappointing him. This gentle man who spoke softly and worried about her comfort was nothing like the monster king she had imagined. "I'm not afraid," she lied, then immediately felt bad about adding another lie to her growing pile. I want to be a good wife to you." Something flickered in Alaric's eyes. Surprise, maybe even pleasure. "You already are," he said quietly. "You're here, aren't you? That's more than many royal wives can say." The sadness in his voice made Maya's heart ache. How lonely must he have been, expecting a wife who would only tolerate him. The real Cordelia would have been perfect for him. She was smart, educated, and actually belonged in this world. Maya was just a village girl who could barely read and had never owned a dress without patches. "Your Majesty," a guard's voice boomed from outside the doors. "Urgent news from the Eastern lands." Alaric frowned and called for the guard to enter. The man looked tired and dusty from hard riding, his uniform torn and muddy. "Speak," Alaric commanded, his voice instantly changing back to the royal tone Maya recognized. "The Eastern lands have been attacked, Your Majesty. Lord Marcus is dead, and his daughter, the real Lady Cordelia, is missing. Bandits destroyed their carriage 3 days ago." The world seemed to spin around Maya. 3 days ago, that was the day she had arrived here, pretending to be Cordelia. If the real Cordelia was missing, then who was she supposed to be now? Alaric's face went pale. Then his eyes slowly turned to Maya. The kindness there was changing into something else. Confusion, suspicion, and growing anger. "If Cordelia is missing," he said slowly, his voice like ice, "then who exactly are you?" Maya's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The truth was right there, begging to spill out. But what would happen to her when it did? What would happen to poor Cordelia, wherever she was? I can explain," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew no explanation would be good enough. The fairy tale was over, and it was time to face the dragon. "Guards!" Alaric's voice thundered through the dining room like a crack of lightning, making Maya jump from her chair so fast she knocked over her water cup. The crystal goblet shattered on the marble floor, sending pieces flying like tiny diamonds. Maya stared at the broken glass, thinking it looked exactly like her heart felt, scattered into a million sharp pieces that could never be put back together. 3 armed guards rushed into the room, their metal armor clanking like chains. Their hands rested on their sword handles, ready to fight whatever enemy their king had discovered. But the enemy was just a scared girl in a borrowed dress. "Seize her," Alaric commanded, pointing at Maya with a finger that shook with rage. "She's been lying to us all along." "No, wait!" Maya cried out, backing away until she bumped into the stone wall. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the truth anymore. "Please let me explain. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." The guards moved toward her like hunting wolves. but Alaric held up his hand to stop them. His eyes burned with fury and something else. Hurt. Deep, painful hurt that made Maya feel sick to her stomach. "Explain?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Explain how you made me believe you were a noble lady. Explain how you made me think I was married to someone real instead of a lying thief." "I'm not a thief," Maya protested, even though she knew he was right about the lying part. "I never stole anything from you." "You stole my trust," Alaric shot back. "You stole 3 days of my life, thinking I had found someone who might actually care about me instead of just my crown." The pain in his voice hit Maya harder than any slap could have. She had hurt him, this lonely king who had tried so hard to be kind to her. She had made him believe someone could love him for who he was, not what he owned. "I do care about you," she whispered, and realized with shock that it was true. Somewhere between the wedding ceremony and this morning's breakfast, she had started to care about the gentle man behind the royal mask. Alaric laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no joy in it. "Care about me? You don't even know me. You've been too busy pretending to be someone else." Before Maya could respond, another commotion erupted outside the dining room. Shouting voices, running footsteps, and the sound of horses in the courtyard below. Alaric strode to the window, his face growing darker with each passing second. "What now?" he muttered, then called to his guards. "Find out what that noise is about." A different guard burst through the doors, breathing hard like he had run up all the castle stairs. "Your Majesty, Lord Victor from the Western Lands is here with 50 soldiers. He demands to see you immediately." Maya felt her knees go weak. Lord Victor was Cordelia's uncle, a mean, cruel man who had always wanted to take control of the Eastern lands for himself. If he was here with soldiers, it couldn't be for anything good. "He says he has news about your marriage," the guard continued. "He claims it's not legal and demands you hand over the false bride for punishment." Alaric's jaw clenched so tight, Maya could see the muscles jumping. "Does he now?" he said in a voice that could freeze fire. "Well, let's not keep Lord Victor waiting." He turned to Maya, and she saw something she didn't expect in his eyes. Not just anger, but protectiveness, like he was getting ready to fight for her, even though she had lied to him. "Stay close to me," he ordered. "Whatever happens down there, don't leave my side. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to work. Why was he protecting her? She had deceived him, hurt him, made him look foolish in front of his own kingdom. She deserved whatever punishment Lord Victor wanted to give her. They walked through the castle corridors like a funeral march. Guards surrounded them, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls like drums of war. Maya's legs felt like water, barely able to carry her forward to whatever terrible fate awaited. The Great Hall had been transformed into something from Maya's worst nightmares. Lord Victor stood in the center like a vulture, surrounded by his armed men. His cold gray eyes found Maya immediately and filled with cruel satisfaction. "So," Victor said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "this is the little peasant girl who thought she could play queen. Did you really think you could fool everyone forever?" "How did you know?" Maya asked before she could stop herself. Victor's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because I have the real Cordelia locked in my dungeons, you stupid child. She told me everything about your pathetic little plan to save her from marriage." The hall gasped as one. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Cordelia was alive, but she was Victor's prisoner. Her best friend, the real lady, was suffering because of Maya's choices. "You have no right to hold Lady Cordelia," Alaric said, stepping forward. His voice carried the full power of a king, making even Victor's soldiers shift nervously. "I have every right," Victor replied smoothly. "She's my niece, and this marriage is a fraud. This girl has no noble blood, no family name, no right to wear a crown. She's nothing but a village rat who got above her station." The words cut Maya like knives, but they were all true. She was nobody special, just a poor girl who had gotten in way over her head. She didn't belong in this world of kings and crowns and political games. Furthermore, Victor continued, pulling out an official-looking document, I demand she be handed over to me for proper punishment. The penalty for impersonating nobility is death. The word death rang through the hall like a funeral bell. Maya's vision went gray around the edges, and she swayed on her feet. This was really happening. She was going to die because she had tried to help her friend. But then Alaric stepped in front of her, his broad shoulders blocking her view of Victor's cruel face. When he spoke, his voice was steady and strong, like mountains that couldn't be moved. Over my dead body, the silver chains around Alaric's wrists burned like ice as Lord Garrett's warriors dragged him toward the execution platform. His wolf clawed desperately inside his chest, but the cursed metal kept his beast trapped in human form. The morning sun cast long shadows across the castle courtyard, where his own people now watched in stunned silence. Your false king chose a lying witch over his duty to you, Garrett announced to the gathered crowd, his voice booming off stone walls. Now witness what happens to those who break sacred pack laws. But Alaric's eyes weren't on the executioner's blade. They searched frantically through the sea of faces for one person. Where was she? Had Mira escaped as he'd begged her to do? His heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird. Then he saw her. Mira stood at the very back of the crowd, her hood pulled low, but not low enough to hide those fierce green eyes that had haunted his dreams. She pressed one finger to her lips when their gazes met, then pointed toward the castle's highest tower. A small smile curved her mouth, the same mysterious smile that had first captured his attention 3 moons ago. Any last words, false king? Garrett sneered, grabbing Alaric's chin roughly. Just one question, Alaric said calmly, though his pulse raced. Do you smell that? Garrett frowned. Smell what? Smoke. The scent hit the crowd a heartbeat later. Heads turned toward the castle as orange flames licked at the windows of the great hall. Shouts erupted from every direction as people realized the ancient building was burning. But this wasn't just any fire. This was magical flame that burned only what its caster wanted destroyed. In the chaos that followed, Alaric felt the silver chains around his wrists suddenly loosen. He glanced up to see Mira's younger brother, Thomas, crouched on the platform support beams with a set of lockpicks clutched in his small hands. She said to tell you the real fight starts now, Thomas whispered, before disappearing back into the maze of wooden supports. Alaric's wolf burst free the moment the cursed silver fell away. His bones cracked and reformed as power flooded back through his body, like lightning through his veins. The crowd screamed and scattered as a massive black wolf landed where the king had stood just seconds before. But Garrett was ready for him. The enemy alpha's own transformation rippled through muscles and bone until a brown wolf, nearly as large as Alaric, snarled from across the platform. Yellow eyes filled with hatred, locked onto silver ones, blazing with protective fury. They clashed in midair above the burning castle. Teeth met throat. Claws raked across ribs. The two alphas rolled and fought with savage intensity, while their packs formed circles around the platform. This was more than a battle for leadership. This was a war for the future of their people. Alaric had size and strength on his side, but Garrett fought with the desperation of someone who had already lost everything. The brown wolf's fangs found their mark again and again, leaving deep gashes across Alaric's shoulders and flanks. Just when Alaric thought his strength might fail, he heard it. A howl unlike any other split the air above them. Every wolf in the courtyard, friend and enemy alike, dropped to their bellies in automatic submission. The sound carried power older than kingdoms, wilder than any alpha's authority. Mira stood on the castle's highest balcony, with flames dancing behind her like wings. But she was no longer the simple healer who had won his heart with gentle touches and knowing smiles. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge. Her green eyes blazed with silver fire as ancient magic flowed through her blood. She spread her arms wide and spoke words in the old tongue that made the very stones of the castle sing in response. By moon and star, by earth and flame, I call upon the power that flows through my veins. Let truth be seen and lies be burned away like morning mist. Light exploded from her fingertips and washed over every person in the courtyard. Where it touched Garrett's supporters, their true nature was revealed. Some were mercenaries paid in gold rather than loyal pack members. Others were rogues who served only their own hunger for power. But when the light touched Alaric's people, they shone with the pure silver glow of true loyalty. Garrett's wolf stumbled backward as his army crumbled around him. Half his warriors fled immediately when their deception was exposed. The others found themselves surrounded by Alaric's pack, who now knew beyond doubt that their king had spoken truth. "Impossible," Garrett snarled as he shifted back to human form. "She's nothing but a healer with no magic, no power, no right to what?" Mira called down from the balcony, her voice carrying easily across the courtyard. "To love your king? To use the gifts passed down through my bloodline? To protect those I care about?" She raised her hand and spoke another word in the ancient language. Vines erupted from the ground around Garrett's feet, growing with impossible speed until they held him fast. But these weren't ordinary plants. They glowed with the same silver light that had revealed truth from lies. The old magic recognizes no kingdoms or alphas. Mira continued as she began to descend the stone steps that led from balcony to courtyard. It serves only those who use it to protect rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm. Each step she took seemed to make the magic around them stronger. Flowers bloomed from cracks in the stone. The flames that had threatened to consume the castle gentled into warm, welcoming light that danced but didn't burn. When she finally reached Alaric's side, the transformation was complete. The mysterious healer who had hidden her true nature was gone. In her place stood a woman whose power was matched only by her compassion, and whose love for her king blazed brighter than any magic. "Now you see why I couldn't tell you everything at once," she said softly, touching the cuts on his chest with fingers that immediately began to ease his pain. "Some truths are too dangerous to speak before the right moment arrives." Alaric felt his heart stop and restart as he realized what this meant. She hadn't been deceiving him out of cruelty or ambition. She'd been protecting not just herself, but everyone she loved, until the moment when her power could save them all. 6 months after the battle that changed everything, Alaric stood in his private study, watching the sun rise over a kingdom that barely resembled the one he'd inherited. The castle walls had been rebuilt stronger than before, but that wasn't the most important change. His people no longer lived in fear of enemies, both within and without. Mira entered quietly, carrying a steaming cup of tea that smelled like honey and healing herbs. She wore a simple green dress that made her eyes shine like precious stones. But Alaric knew the true treasure was the peaceful smile that curved her lips these days. "The morning reports," she said, settling into the chair beside his desk. 3 more families of rogues arrived during the night, seeking sanctuary. The builders finished the new houses in the eastern quarter yesterday, so there's room for everyone. "Good." Alaric accepted the tea gratefully, breathing in the comforting scent. "What about the southern border?" "Completely quiet. Lord Marcus sent word that the patrol found nothing but deer tracks and wildflowers." Mira's eyes twinkled with mischief. "He also mentioned that his youngest daughter has been asking when we might visit again. I think someone has developed a crush on her king." Alaric nearly choked on his tea. "She's barely 12 years old. Exactly the right age for impossible dreams about handsome princes." Mira laughed, the sound like silver bells in the morning air. "Don't worry. I remember having similar fantasies when I was her age, though mine involved mysterious knights who would rescue me from boring lessons about proper herb preparation." The casual mention of her childhood made Alaric's chest tighten with emotion. Even now, months after learning her true identity, he sometimes struggled to believe this wonderful woman had chosen to stay with him. She could have left after Garrett's defeat, could have traveled anywhere in the kingdom and been welcomed with honor and gratitude. Instead, She'd chosen to make their marriage real in every way that mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Giving up your freedom to be tied to a kingdom and all its problems?" Mira set down her own cup and moved to perch on the arm of his chair. Her fingers combed gently through his dark hair in the way that never failed to make his wolf purr with contentment. "Freedom isn't about being able to go anywhere," she said thoughtfully. "It's about choosing where you belong. And I belong here, with you, helping to build something better than what came before." Through the window, they could see children playing in the castle courtyard. Some had been born to noble families, others to merchants and farmers. A few were the orphaned cubs of rogues who had found new homes within the pack, but they all played together without caring about bloodlines or status. "Look at them," Mira murmured, following his gaze. "In 10 years, those children will be adults who never knew a world where rogues were automatically cast out or where alphas ruled through fear alone. The changes we've made will outlast us both." A knock at the study door interrupted them. Thomas poked his head inside, his face bright with excitement despite the early hour. "Sorry to bother you," the young man said, "but there's a messenger here from the northern kingdoms. She says it's urgent and will only speak to both of you together." Alaric and Mira exchanged glances. Messages that required both king and queen usually meant either very good news or very bad trouble. They found the messenger waiting in the great hall, still dusty from hard travel. She was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and the lean build of someone who spent most of her life in wolf form running long distances. "Your Majesties," she said, dropping into a respectful bow. "I bring greetings from King Roderick of the Mountain Territories and Queen Isabella of the Coastal Lands. Please, sit," Mira said kindly, gesturing toward the cushioned chairs near the fireplace. "You must be exhausted. Thomas, would you ask the kitchen to send food and drink?" The messenger's grateful smile transformed her tired face. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Your reputation for kindness has spread far beyond your own borders." "What news do you bring?" Alaric asked, once the woman had settled with a plate of warm bread and jam. "Both kingdoms wish to propose formal alliances," she said between eager bites, "but not the old kind based on fear and mutual protection from enemies. They want to follow your example, creating partnerships focused on trade, shared knowledge, and mutual aid during times of need." Alaric felt his eyebrows rise in surprise. "They want to model their policies after ours?" "More than that," the messenger leaned forward eagerly. "They want to establish the same protections for rogues that you've created here. Queen Isabella has personally offered sanctuary to any displaced families who need safe passage to reach your territories." Mira's hand found Alaric's and squeezed gently. He could feel her joy through their bond, the same fierce happiness he felt whenever their small actions rippled outward to help others. "There's more," the messenger continued. "King Roderick's eldest son will be coming of age next spring. Instead of a traditional combat trial, he's requested permission to spend a season here, learning how to lead through service rather than dominance. Of course," Mira said immediately, "any young person seeking to learn peaceful leadership is welcome in our home." The messenger finished her meal and prepared to leave, but she paused at the Great Hall's entrance. "If I may speak freely," she said, "what you've built here gives hope to people across many kingdoms. The idea that strength and compassion can work together instead of fighting each other, that's something worth spreading." End quote. After she left, Alaric and Mira stood together in the sudden quiet of the hall. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting everything in shades of gold and warmth. "When I was a child," Mira said softly, "my grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, when all the kingdoms were connected by bonds of friendship, instead of separated by walls of suspicion. I always thought they were just fairy tales. Maybe they were prophecies instead," Alaric suggested, pulling her close. "Maybe your grandmother could see further into the future than anyone realized." Mira tilted her head up to look at him, and he saw his own wonder reflected in her green eyes. They had started as strangers, bound by desperate necessity. Now they stood as partners whose love had become the foundation for changes neither of them had dared to dream. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "we'll face it together." And as if in response to her words, their bond hummed with shared strength and unshakable trust. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities, challenges, and the endless potential for growth. Outside, children's laughter mixed with the sound of hammers, building new homes for families who had never expected to find belonging. Inside, a king and queen held each other close and planned for tomorrow with hearts full of hope.